So today we're interviewing Professor Louis Buatois, who is the SEPM Raymond Seymour Paleontology Medal winner for 2022. And I'm Shannon Hsieh, a postdoctoral researcher at Jagiellonian University. So Professor Buatois, in 5 minutes or less, do you mind summarizing your path to the geosciences?
Yeah, thanks, Shannon, for doing this. Actually, you know, it's interesting because I grew up in Buenos Aires in Argentina, which is a city really far away from mountains. But when I was a kid, I had the opportunity of doing a couple of trips to the mountain, and that's how I started to get interested in geology and the natural sciences in general. So what I did is I did my undergrad at Buenos Aires University, and I did my PhD there as well. So it was kind of a standard pathway to geology in the way that I always have had a general interest in biology, geology, and so on. And as you know, I work on trace fossils, and that's kind of ichnology, you know, the field which studied animal substrate interactions. And it's sort of interesting that I have always had an interest in paleontology and sedimentology, both fields. And I started university thinking I was going to be a paleontologist, but then I discovered sedimentology. So I always been halfway between the two fields, and in that sense, ichnology is kind of ideal because you are halfway through it. It's a multidisciplinary field, and I always say that if you have some sort of identity crisis, it's the ideal field because you don't have to make a decision: are you a paleontologist or are you a sedimentologist? And I consider myself to be both.
All right, great. So what are you most proud of in your career?
I would say that I brought three different things. The first is, and the most important, is my graduate students. I think that one of the interesting things of being a professor is that you can touch the lives of a lot of people, and you do that by mentoring and by supervising students. And I've been really fortunate of having very good students and also having a very good relationship with the students. That's something that Gabriela and myself are really proud of, that having a nice research group and being able to actually interact on many different levels with our students. Then the second thing would be, you know, sometimes you have musicians that they are starting to play, you know, and they always dream about playing with some of the big names. The same happens when you are students. So you read about certain people. So I grew up, for example, key book for me was the SEPM short course, Egdale, Bromley, and Pemberton. I remember when that book arrived to the library in Buenos Aires. I was really excited. I was able to get was the first one to get that copy, and I was an undergrad student at that point. So having been able to work with these guys, you know, that are the ones that actually taught me ichnology by what they have written, or having been able to work with Dolph Seelager, which is the other big name. That's something that I really enjoy. I never, when I was an undergrad, or even when I was a graduate student, it never crossed my mind that I was going to be able to meet these guys, publish something with them. It was something completely mentally out of reach. The third thing may be, I mean, some of the papers or the book that Gabriel and I have published. But I mean, what you publish is these are ideas. They may be challenged. They may end up not being correct. But it's the other stuff. I think that the graduate students is probably coming at the top of my list.
Great. Did you ever encounter any challenges or setbacks that turned out to be valuable experiences?
Yeah, well, you know, I mean, my pathway, it's kind of interesting because I grew up in a country like Argentina, which is far from the main centers of research, although the University of Buenos Aires is a very important university, and the Faculty of Science, it's really very good. But when you grew up in developing country, you face a lot of problems. I would say that facing problems is the rule rather than the exception. You may go through economic crisis, budget cuts, sort of political instability. So that's something that you have to deal with that. On the other hand, that make you quite resilient. And you know, as you know, I moved to Canada almost 20 years ago. So I'm in sort of in a different scientific environment. But actually, my colleagues down in Argentina, they do fantastic work under less than ideal circumstances. And that's because they are really resilient. So it's kind of a school for you to face problems and try to solve them. It wasn't a difficulty, but I mean, we changed at some point in our career. We're halfway in our career, and we decided to do a complete change, leaving Argentina and moving to Canada. So that was a challenge. It wasn't a specific problem because we adapted pretty well. It was pretty straightforward. But it was unusual in the sense that at certain point, when you are half of way your career, you tend not to move. You know, you move when you are at the beginning. You do the typical thing of the round of postdocs and all that you know very, very well. That was a challenge, but it ended up working very well, I think.
Great. So do you have any advice for young professionals at the beginning of their careers?
Yeah, I would say it's interesting, but the first thing will be you need to like what you do. That's I always tell that to our own kids, you know. You need to have a passion. If you don't have a passion for what you do, just don't do it. So I know there is a lot of emphasis on finding a job, and that's natural. But I would say never pick up a career because you think you are going to make a lot of money or things like that. You have to do what you like. That's kind of a general one. More specific, if you are going to research as I do, I think that the most important thing is finding the right questions. So don't go just to an outcrop because you think it's a nice outcrop. In our case, go to an outcrop because there are nice trace fossils. Well, you can do it, but I would say the main thing will be which is the problem that you are trying to solve. And once you know that, when you have that question in your mind, then you decide what you are going to do, and not the other way around. And this is something that I see quite a lot to some degree in our field, that sometimes the questions are not there. And you see that when you read a paper. I mean, what is this author trying to do? Which is the big question. So that would be my advice. Some other things are pretty basic. Read whatever you can. I was telling you about this issue that I'm coming from a country which is far away from the main centers. And there are disadvantages because of that, but there is a big advantage, and is you are not being indoctrinated in any specific school. So in a way, you are free to read whatever you want. And one of the things that I learned over the years is that that's not happening everywhere. Sometimes you just read what your supervisor is doing or your own research group is doing. I don't think that's a healthy strategy. So what we learned by what I realized by growing up as a scientist in a place like Argentina is that there was a tradition in paleontology quite important. It's a solid tradition, but at the same time, a lot of freedom to have a really broad reading list, if you wish. And in our case, and I'm getting more specific now, but for example, we are quite eclectic because we have read on ignophages, but we have read on ignophabrics. So we try to do a synthesis between the different schools. And that's something that I think the whole profession is going in that direction. But in our case, I think that was easier because of that freedom to read. And so I would say read a lot, travel a lot for young professionals. Sometimes what I say is you do your PhD, you come up with an interpretation, then you go to the next outcrop and you try to use the same interpretation. It's your mindset. It's prepared to recognize what you are familiar with. So, the more you see, and that's an old motto for geology, the more you see, the better as a geologist you are. So those are, I think,
Right.
my main pieces of advice. Some more general, some more particular.
Right. So sort of stepping out of your comfort zone, reading a lot of
Yes,
different,
yes.
reading a lot
That's
of
the other
things.
thing. Yeah, that's the other thing which is interesting. We tend to repeat what we like to do. So you have your model, or you try to go and look at the same environments all the time. So it's not challenging. There is some kind of work that you can pretty much do almost without thinking. It's kind of automatic work. You go to an outcrop, you apply your standard, phase analysis, trace fossil analysis. You come up with an interpretation, but it's almost automatic. And it would be possible to do a lot of studies like that, but it's not challenging, and you get bored. At least we get bored if we keep on doing the same thing. So yeah, that challenging yourself. Yeah.
Right. So I was also wondering, how do you maintain your time and maintain work-life balance, especially when there's so many topics and interesting areas to cover?
That's a complicated one, and also the fact that both Gabriela and myself, we are both geologists working on research and teaching. The boundary between the two aspects, family and work, tends to get quite blurry at points. We became better when we had our kids. That we stopped working 7 days a week, at least for some time. But it's really difficult. You also the when you work in research, it's something that you are all the time thinking about things. So I always found it really interesting that sometimes when you are writing grant proposals, you have to write how many hours I'm going to dedicate to this project, and you write something, but it's completely artificial. So I may be out running to do a little bit of exercise, and suddenly I have an idea for a paper. Or you are on holidays, and then you start to look at what the waves are doing here, and then there are some cliffs, and you are on holiday, but you are going to go there and look at those rocks. So I think that for us is particularly challenging, and I don't think I'm very good at making that that balance. We try to do it, but how successful we are with that, I'm not completely sure. Yeah, but that's how it's one of the you have some other job that you work from 8 to 4 or 9 to 5, and I know a lot of people that have that opportunity. That's it. You arrive home, you leave your office, the work is done. It's not like that with us, and it's not going to
Right.
be. So that then you have to do a conscious effort to avoid going really off the board.
Right. Sort of like balance out sort of the idea that creativity can happen at any moment, but at the same time, you sort of have to take a break once in
Yeah,
a while.
yeah, yes. And actually, one of the things I'm not good at working at night. For example, I'm sort of an early morning person. So one of the things that I try to do is I like to read. I like to read a lot, different things. So I late at night before going to sleep, I never read anything related with work. It has to do either fiction or non-fiction, but on other topics. And in that way, I kind of shut down. And if not, because one gets quite obsessive with the things, you go to sleep thinking in what you have to do, and it's terrible. That's a very bad idea. It's a recipe for disaster. So yeah, that's one of my tricks. But but that's because I don't work. I'm very bad to work at night, late at night. But that's my strategy. May be of use for other people or not.
So would you say that success and fulfillment are interchangeable? And from your experience, how would you sort of define when you feel successful or fulfilled?
I don't know. That's kind of a tricky one. I see fulfillment more as something more related with the sense of happiness that we may have when you achieve something. It's kind of it has a deeper meaning to me. Success is a word that has been used so much these days, and it's probably a little bit more superficial, at least in the way I see it, and all this pressure in society to be successful, which is kind of meaningless to me. So fulfillment, I prefer that, and I always use the same example. Sometimes if 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 I have let's say I have had a day that has been really tough. I've been working a lot, but if I realize I was doing things that I like being in the field or writing a manuscript, it's fine. But because of that sense of fulfillment, sometimes you are just tired and you have not accomplished something, or you have been working on things that you really don't like a lot, and then you don't feel that at the end of the day. That's what happened, at least in my case. For example, I have a very low patience for meetings in connection with administration. So if I have had a day that has all gone with meetings, well, I'm tired and there is no sense of fulfillment. So it's not a very good feeling. So it's different when you realize, okay, I'm exhausted, but we reached that outcrop. We have seen interesting things. It's a different feeling. But
right,
I would go for fulfillment rather than success. That I see it more like a fashionable word these days. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, sort of like personal fulfillment is a little victory, a little success, right? Regardless of how others do it. Yeah.
It's a deeper feeling. It's a deeper feeling, I think, and more personal in a way. I see success as a pressure from society, and usually success is associated with money. These days, I prefer not to go that way.
Right. Yeah. So I was also thinking of, in terms of geoscience outreach, how do we better improve outreach to others and kind of also transfer creative ideas or knowledge to others?
Yeah, that's a very good point, because we typically thinking. I mean, our job at university professors is typically, they say, research and teaching and administration, research and teaching, and actually outreach will be a fourth, or I would say a third component that is really important, and it has been neglected for the most part, because it's not going. Nobody's going to consider, or very few people are going to consider that in your evaluations if you are doing outreach. But I think it's becoming essential. We need to make sure that the society understand what we do. in some circles, there is a sort of pervasive anti-intellectual feeling. You see that. It's part of the climate of our times. Not everywhere, not with everybody, but we are being seen, in some circles under very bad light, I would say, scientists. And so it's important that we communicate. I like kind of standards ways of communicating. I like popular science books, for example, but there are many different ways. There is all sort of communication techniques nowadays, and it's also important not only to communicate the content of our science, but how we work, which is how scientists actually work. Why we tackle certain topics, which is our approach, how we validate ideas or hypotheses, because there is a lot of confusion about that. There was one interesting experiment that was done, I think, 20, 30 years ago here in Saskatchewan. There was a group of professors that started what they call the People's University. And it wasn't really a university, but it was a series of classes that were being taught almost free at public places like the public library. Well, Canada has an amazing public library system, which is one of the things that was most spectacular for us when we moved. And they were trying to reach the broader public with that. And it was interesting because you have to think that one of the problems in North America is that university education is really very expensive. It's extremely expensive. I mean, coming from a system, in many places in South America and in Argentina, the university is free. So you don't actually pay for your university education. So it's much more people that is able to access to a university education. And that idea of the People's University was trying to fill that gap. It's saying, okay, there is in the society, there's a lot of people who didn't have enough money or did the proper social conditions to go to the university, but they would like to learn something, and then you can do that. It's time consuming, but this group of professors, that was before our time, before we moved here, there was a group of professors that did that, and it was quite successful, and it lasted for several years. Then at some point they stopped doing it. But this is a way of actually communicating with the broader public.
Right. I was also wondering now, like especially with all these challenges in securing job opportunities, what do you consider to be sort of good reasons to consider geosciences as a career path?
Well, first, I mean, it's the issue that we were talking before, the issue of having a passion for the topic. That's coming top of the list. Don't pick up a subject because you think you are going to make a lot of money. It's you have to do what you actually like. And I always seen in a way there's kind of a problem with the job market and the student recruitment, because they tend to be out of phase. So the classic situation is the oil prices are going up, so you get a lot of students entering into the geology program, but then perhaps the oil prices are going down at the end by the time of graduating. So you end up having a lot of students who suddenly they don't have that dream job that they were thinking about, and they end up having a degree about something that they don't really like. So I would say the first thing for me will be do what you like. But also from the perspective of jobs, based on the estimation that I have seen, what we are going to witness is an increase in the job in the positions for geologists in general, but it's going to be different. It's going to go into other directions. But the future for the profession is looking, I would say, relatively is good. It's not the same in probably the same kind of jobs, but it's not bad by any means. And again, that's kind of problematic, because sometimes administrators may be short-minded, and if right away there are no jobs, they will think, okay, let's shut down the degree. I know that in Australia has happened. Some universities, they close their geology programs, and now they will be facing that there is a demand for geologists, and they don't have those highly qualified personnel in the pipeline so yeah, it's hard to do that long-term planning.
Yeah. So, in your opinion, how has the geoscience industry changed over the years, and what are your sort of thoughts on the directions that it's going in?
Well, clearly, I mean, the big challenge for all of us as a society is climate change, and it's overwhelming. I mean, if you read the last panel, the last report of the global climate change panel, it's quite dramatic. We are talking about a short window of opportunity to do something that is closing rapidly. That's what they say. So I think that our profession may be moving in that direction. Towards green economy, green energy. It's going to be always it's going to be resource based to some degree, because you need resources even for a green energy. So I think that environmental science, that's another topic that I think is going to become more and more important. And I'm a strong defender of the basic. I think that that's always something that you need to have in mind, that when you are getting a university education, there has to be a strong background on the basic sciences, and then you can work on the applications. But there is certain basic concept that it has to be reinforced all the time. I mean, for example, for us, I mean, the type of rocks, plate tectonics, all sort of earth processes. That's very basic information that you are going to use it pretty much no matter what you do in general. So, but I see anyway a shift towards facing the problem of climate change, which is the by far the most important problem that we face, and it has a lot of ramifications. It has to be tackled from multiple perspectives, geological, of course, but also sociology, the economy. It is a typical case of a multidisciplinary problem.
Do you think there are certain areas of geosciences that are underestimated in terms of their usefulness or their sort of potential that many people have still yet to uncover?
I don't really know. I think that it's when you look at some of the programs, they are quite variable. In the universities, they tend to emphasize on, you look at the configuration of the different departments. Depending where you go, they focus on different topics. Some programs are stronger in hard rocks, some others are stronger in sedimentary rocks. What I see probably is moving towards multidisciplinary topics. I think that we still, for example, if you are at the university, you will see that there is a lot of talk about multidisciplinary fields. But then you try to come up with a class, and you have to use a prefix. It's going to be geol something or paleo bio something. So still, although we talk a lot about the importance of being multidisciplinary, the way the organization is set up does not promote that. I think that moving into fields that are multidisciplinary, and climate change is one example, is essential. And we both do trace fossils and ethnology, and that's a field that is classically interdisciplinary. if you move and you try to connect different fields, you know. So you can do something more paleobiological, you can do something that is more sedimentological, but when you work along that interface is when new things pop up. So I'm quite convinced about that need to, and as you have said, it's moving out of your comfort zone. Also at the scale of a science, moving into topics that are more integrative, that involve different fields, and we still have a tendency to do our thing, you know,
Right.
rather than it's even a sociological problem. You know, the communities are quite isolated, and well, even in ethnology, you have vertebrate
Right.
ethnology, invertebrate ethnology, and it's hard to be. We have struggled with this for years, trying to. We have done improvements. Now we have the IGNIA meetings where we can actually connect the two communities, but still we have this tendency to, okay, I'm going to do my thing, and you can that works at different scales. It works at the individual scale, research group scale, or the scale of fields, whole fields. For example, integrating geochemistry with stratigraphy, with sedimentology. Right. It's really a very interesting avenue to follow. And then there may be other areas that of geology that I'm totally unaware of, and they are probably underexplored. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was thinking of, in terms of also career paths, how can we better bridge the gap between academia and industry?
Well, that it's a challenge. I think that it depends. Some universities do that better than others. I think in North America there is a very good way of doing internships, which is something that is not that common in other places. So, for example, the students that in our university, University of Saskatchewan, is very common that in summer students do internships in the industry or in the geological survey, and that's quite useful for them. There is a lot of networking involved. They learn the sort of the details of how you apply your knowledge to solve certain problems that are of interest for the industry. Also, I would say, in addition to that, you know, bridging the gap between the science and industry, is the issue of bridging the gap with the society, you know, with the overall society. And what we talk about outreach before kind of goes in that direction. Sometimes, you know, what the society require, there may be an overlap with what the industry require, but it's not going to be a perfect coincidence, you know. And climate change again is an issue, because that's a strong need from the perspective of the society of things that need to be done, and that may be coincident with the industry interests or not. But definitely we have to also analyze that. I mean, how do we bridge that gap, not only between university and industry, but with the university and the society as a whole? What is being required? Which are the present challenges right now?
Do you have any other advice going forward for early career professionals in the geosciences?
I will probably end up reiterating the things that I said before. The issue of being passionate about something, asking the right questions, or interesting questions, not the right questions. The importance of reading a lot. The issue of traveling. Also, I have a way of looking at things. I've always been. I mentioned that I've been always halfway between sedimentology and paleontology, but also at a broader scale. Both Gabriel and myself have always had an interest in the humanities. So, in fact, when we were doing our PhD in geology, we decided to study philosophy. So we got the degree in philosophy, and we were particularly interested in philosophy of science, but we did the whole degree. And I think that it's extremely important, if we are going to be scientists, to have a very strong background in the humanities, because particularly philosophy, because it forces you to think about what you are doing, you know. And there is a classical distinction between the rationality as a tool to do things, and rationality as something that helps you to ask yourself about the goals. And when as scientists we work with science as instrument, with reason as instrumental reason. Is okay, we need to solve this problem, and we are going to solve that problem with these tools. But philosophy forces you to think about the goals. So you step a little bit backwards, and you look at what you are doing, and that's extremely that for me is extremely important. People tend to think, oh, okay, well, I've seen in general in some scientific circles that they don't look at the humanities with the same sense of respect that you look at the science. And I think it's a big mistake. So that would be one advice that I didn't do. We didn't talk about that before in your previous question, but I would think really giving importance to humanities, to other fields, you know, the arts. I think that it's important, if you are going to be a scientist, don't just read about your field. If you read about other topics, on one hand, it will give you a different perspective. Also, will help you to come up with analogies. You as soon as you start reading about broader topics, you start seeing analogies with other fields. And sometimes one of the problems when because the lack of time and the pressure to produce, right, is that, okay, this is my topic, I'm going to read about my topic, and nothing else is going to be important. And to the point that sometimes you will see even in research groups, the students will not talk to each other or become familiar with the other is doing, because they are really too focused on their own topic. And that's the reason with our research group, we have an internal seminar that each of the students is every week is giving a little talk on what the student is doing. And it's quite useful, because then the others, okay, and they look, okay, this is what this guy is doing. It's different from my project, but I am starting to see some connections and ideas pop up. So I think that would be my additional advice. And yeah, try to do that. I know it's time consuming, but it's useful, extremely useful.
Right. Yeah, that's great advice. I know that feeling, because sometimes there have been moments when, for instance, I just think of an idea and wonder if somebody, for example, in the department next door or at a different university is thinking of similar things. And sometimes I read a paper and wonder if someone else maybe working on something else has read this and thought about it in a different way. So I definitely.
It's impressively how compartmentalized are some of the sciences. And again, we keep on talking about being multidisciplinary, but is sometimes we pay lip service, but we don't actually do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And some fields may be more willing to do it than others, or maybe not willing to do it, but be in a better position to do it than others. And again, acknowledges we are halfway between two big fields. So by definition, we can have that conversation between sedimentologists and paleontologists that help us a lot.
Right, and I think that geosciences in general is really good for that, because as you were mentioning before, there are many facets. For example, society is impacted by the physical earth, living things are impacted, other disciplines such as the physical sciences, natural sciences, all are interconnected with the physical Earth and what's living on it. So I feel like the points of contact between geosciences and other disciplines are just relatively wide. Yeah.
Yeah, completely. The idea of the Earth as a system, I mean, is central to that notion. Um, so the geosciences in general, they are well suited for that conversation, because you are working with a level of complexity that is significant. So you need to have that background in chemistry and physics, but also you have the interaction with biology. We see how the evolution of our planet is just that interaction between physical and biotic processes. And then, as you have said, there's a connection with the society and the climate. So we are in a good position to be able to have that conversation with other fields. And we need to find out the strategies to be able to do that, as in research, but also in teaching, to be able to move out of the structure of the departments, to have something that is more connecting the different departments at the university, within a college and between colleges as well.
Right. Yeah. So just finally, before we wrap up, just wanted to ask you, reflecting on your passion towards your discipline, do you think loving what you do comes with time?
I think that there is a point to that. In my case, I like what I was doing from the very beginning, but I know that sometimes when you are working on something and when you realize that you are understanding what's going on, then you like it most. So there is some truth to what you have said. I'm not sure if it applied completely in my case, because I really like this from the very beginning. I may have done other things. I have some broad, spectrum of interests. I may have gone strictly into the humanities, doing things like sociology, political sciences. I like that, but I didn't do that. But regardless of the field itself, the research component has always been there, and that's my main interest, is trying to understand how things work. That's basic. But I think that you are perfectly right, that sometimes, perhaps at the very beginning, we are not that excited about something until we really start to understand. And then with that understanding comes a better appreciation of what you are doing, and then probably you are starting to love that more than at the very beginning. Yeah, there is some truth to that. Yeah.
Right. Thank you very much, Professor Buatois.
Thanks for doing this, Shannon. It was great talking to you.
Yeah. Have a great day.
You too. Thank you so much.